Thank you. I'm a haematologist in Northumbria, and I also have a role at the University of Sunderland, the new medical school there, where I lead the Masters in Medical Education. I've got a fair background in educational supervision and want to share some general guidance, some hints and tips, and maybe keep a few of you out of trouble. I've been at fitness to practice hearings for both undergraduate and postgraduate. I've been involved as director of medical education, and I've a lot of what I'm going to share is just some personal experience, some stories, and just some general hints and tips, which I hope can help. I write about this a little bit. I blog for the college, so there's a few things there if you want to see peer into my brain a little bit about this kind of thing. I think things are different for doctors, and I'm picking up on the thread of a few of the speakers who've gone before. It's lovely to follow such folk. Doctors are a funny bunch, and I think people do things very differently when they're medics. Medics are very, very worried about their future career. They don't like revealing things to their supervisor. They're worried that they can't cope. And I think there's this prevailing, they just do not know what to do sometimes. They're in this chaos of the clinical environment. They haven't quite grasped this idea that there's maybe somebody who can help them. They don't know that their supervisor has what role. They don't quite know where to go. Medics don't often fit into this line manager mind. And most of the people in an organization would be very, very clear who they should speak to and get advice for something like this. So they just don't know where to go. And people who are ill, people who've got problems, people who've got issues, they know that a lot of culture in a lot of our organizations is that you just do not take time off. You can't do that. You're putting on other people. It's your weakness. And I hope that culture is changing a little bit, but it still exists. We've got lots of people who don't like showing vulnerability. They don't like sharing their health concerns, their emotions, and they're sitting in this culture, and we've got professional regulation. We've already seen some GMC guidance and statute and curriculum. That all sits there. It's an absolute that's very, very hard to get around. And there's so much about medicine is, proving how infallible you are, proving your perfection, making sure people, do these exams. And what this all leads to, this kind of madness, this chaos, is that doctors are notorious for bypassing systems, especially when it comes to their health. Lots of stories of people doing it wrong, doing it on the corridor, trying to do things themselves, seeking advice from others rather than just going to their GP or using occupational health. It results in doctors having the lowest sick rate of any other profession. I think the average is around 8 to 10 days sick, most other normal people. And unfortunately, a perk of the job as a medic is it's not that you can't get sick. You get sick just like everybody else, but we're really, really not very good at taking it. And this is called presenteeism, if you ever fancy looking up a term to understand why people do this. So I often kind of think and I reflect on that. I wonder why these things happen. And over the years, seeing people getting into trouble, having problems, struggling in various places, it's a lot about the environment. And we have stress, we have rotas, we have exams, we have geography, we have huge areas that people have to train in and move across. Their partners are in another deanery. And we've kind of created this madness, this difficulty for that people have to work in. And if you're already feeling a little bit vulnerable, you haven't quite got all of that advantage that some of your colleagues might have, this can get very difficult. And what I often see as well is that well-meaning people can really, really worsen things. I can think over the years of well-meaning supervisors who've requested an ultrasound scan because somebody was worried about a lump. I've seen supervisors thinking that they could make the referral to a psychiatrist on behalf of their trainee. Real stepping over the boundary of what your role is as a supervisor. It's just not the done thing. Medicine as well is unique because we catapult people into situations that remind them so much. We had a good medical education conference just yesterday in the university, and we've been talking about how placements can really, really remind people of family, of death, and of illness. If your dad died of heart disease and you suddenly see the man looking like your dad in front of you, you're going to be anxious in that situation. And recently we've seen a few more students at undergraduate level emerging through our psychiatry placements as well. very uncomfortable recognizing that experience themselves, recognizing the descriptions. We put people with illness in the same situation where their illness happens. And is it any wonder that just occasionally people implode, or a crisis happens on a ward where no other crisis has ever happened before for that trainee who bounced through ED, they've bounced through their gastro placement, but put them on the surgical ward, something goes wrong. And it's not necessarily always about the ward. There's these kind of reminders that happen. And I started off by saying I want to keep a few of you out of trouble. I have been in an employment tribunal. This is kind of the worst end of where supervision going wrong can put you. As an educational supervisor, you're phenomenally unlikely to be called up into an employment tribunal, but theoretically you could be. If somebody ends up dismissed, loses their training number, loses their job, it would be not unusual for that person to consider getting a lawyer. Why the heck wouldn't you? You've potentially lost out hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds in your training, and you can take people to court over that process. So educational supervision sits in this regulatory framework, and as a supervisor, you could end up pulled up because of that. Hopefully not very often, but it can happen. So these are some top tips from lawyers that I worked with while going through a tribunal. And this is what I'm trying to get you all to think of as supervisors. Don't be biased. Easy to say, not so easy to do. So be aware of your bias. Where are your biases? Where do you get your views on trainees from? Where has it come from? Has it come from the rumor mill, the emails that are flying around, the nudge in the corridor about Jimmy, who you're getting next week? This all creates bias, unfounded negativity, unfounded negative views, that kind of that prejudgment that we all know about with as histopathologists, as clinicians, that pre-test sort of variable. This bias is how you interpret the trainee's performance in front of you if you think they're coming in and you've already got some negative views. I kind of had this third point as one of the questions earlier on as well. One recurring issue with faults and problems in the department is that when you look into them, they weren't taken seriously. Previous trainees had complained about something, adjustments weren't made, accusations were made about problems on a ward or in a unit, and they weren't taken seriously. So these three things feature very prominently in employment tribunals where training program directors or educational supervisors have been. So I want to think about protecting you all, making sure that you do not end up in this kind of trouble. And you need communication skills. You need the ability to talk to your trainee. I know all of you are doctors. Pretty much most of you should have some communication skills. Use them. And the thing to remember through all of this is when you're talking to your trainee, it's about them. It's not about you. It's not about how you fix things. It's not about how you coped with your training. You are a completely different human being to the trainee in front of you. Don't assume a thing. Just because you employed a nanny or you drove 23 miles twice a day, these aren't things that everybody can fit with. You've got to listen to the person in front of you, completely understand your trainees, talk to them and understand. And I think don't normalize. The phrase that comes from is a trainee who's probably had the most influence on me over all the years. It was right a long time ago when I started looking after foundation doctors. She went on a 2-year period of sickness due to her profound depression, inpatient type level depression, admission for several months. She'd been told that the reason she was feeling so bad in her foundation year was just because it was the foundation year. She was too frightened to go to that next step. People were normalizing that sadness that she experienced. So be really, really careful. You have a huge influence on how people respond to their personal difficulties and go through. So if I can give you some hints about the conversations that you need to have with your trainees, it's about objectivity. We so often are basing what we think about a trainee on something somebody said. Like I said at the start, that unfounded bias, that unfounded negativity. You've got to try and pick out the facts. And if you ever go on a supervision course, we kind of do these things, there's a few of us run them. What you're trying to work through with a trainee is what you see. You don't need to talk about your opinion on things, just describing what you have seen, where they've struggled, where they're one of the questions earlier on was about, say, somebody with communication difficulties or behaving unprofessionally. You don't say you're a bad, you've been in a bad mood all day, haven't you? You say, I can see you answered that nurse and you raised your voice a little bit. That's what I saw. And you're not offering your opinion. You're opening conversations to understand what's going on through a trainee's life. It is amazing how many times people who are struggling in the workplace aren't telling you something about their personal life, their personal problems, because they haven't felt comfortable to and they don't know what to do with it. So these are the kind of communication skills about description. Don't judge, don't prejudge. You can't assume a thing. And that little message there about dealing with things. Don't ignore them. There's that Friday feeling. If I ignore something, it'll go away. To use Douglas Adams references again, my favorite author, he had a thing you could plug into in your spaceship. It was a button you pressed, and it made this entire spaceship invisible. It was called the somebody else's problem button, and you could press it. And I think that's sometimes what we kind of do with trainees. We kind of hope that they're somebody else's problem. And you can't sit like that. You've got to deal with these things. So I've got a little list of things to do and not to do. Remembering your role is probably the big thing here. You've only got so much time, you've only got so much capability, and you've only got so many skills. You cannot solve everything. You can't be the trainee's doctor. And I think that's number one. If you forget everything else I'm talking about, do not take on their doctoring. You are not their psychiatrist. You can't organize their ultrasound referral. You can't refer them to people. That's somebody else's job. You need to know who has that role. And generally, that will be training program, their GP, the occupational health department. You have to be that triage, that signposter, the person who knows who can do something. I've heard of people lending trainees money to get them out of financial problems. It goes wrong. You can feel the swelling of the uncomfortable relationships that can develop. And I'm put a bottom line there as well, which sometimes can read a bit uncomfortably, that you shouldn't be your trainee's friend, but you should be friendly. You need to be approachable, you need to be open, but there will be situations where being very close to someone can really make things difficult in terms of giving feedback, dealing with issues that have happened on the ward. So be careful, be friendly, but watch that line that people can cross where it can become a friend. It can get people into problems. It can be seen as unfair bias if everybody who looks like me goes on to achieve things. So beware of that bias. I've got a little diagram there on the right for something for you to look up in the future. Look at the drama triangle. It's been a very helpful model for me thinking about how we supervise trainees in the past. If you look up Kaplan's drama model, it'll give you some good ideas about not falling into the rescuer mode so often. You have to be more of a coach. You have to get the trainee out of victim mode. You have to watch out for who they're accusing of persecution. It's a really useful model for transactional analysis that some of you might enjoy a bit more read about. So when you're dealing with your trainees, I've advised you to be objective, to know the facts, to have first-hand stories, and to be willing to do these with your trainees. You need to document things as a supervisor. We've got portfolios that are doing that. Keep a record of what you're doing. And I would advise that you share that record with the trainee. That's, therefore everything's open. You give them the chance to adjust, to change. This is what we agreed. This is what I saw. This is what we're going to do. So that becomes a permanent record of your interaction, your willingness to do things, your willingness to take things a little bit further. Can I advise you all to stop the email tennis about trainees? It doesn't work, it isn't good, and it will come out in the wash if things go wrong. Emails are okay to share notes, discussions that are agreed. Imagine your trainee copied into every single email that you're writing about them. Do not be having that discussion. It's the same, even the coffee room discussion. We've had trainees get very upset, understandably, when someone has asked them about their health and say, I didn't tell you about my health. And you backtrack, it's been around the coffee table, that unwanted discussion that people can have. So watch out for the emails. Think about the skills that you need as a supervisor. You need to have that good relationship that we've talked about. So setting your stall out at induction. This is what I am for. This is what I do. This is how I will work. This is how you meet me. You can expect this amount of time out of me. All of those kind of things are really important so that the trainee gets a really good, clear induction to you, your department, where they hang their coat in the morning. All of those kind of things will help you work out what to do. And if there's a few other ideas I want you to take away, look at some of the GMC guidance, look at what's there that's set as standards. And you can get things out of it in huge numbers of levels, but good handover is a huge thing about understanding how to work with trainees who've got other needs, other requirements. You need protocols, you need policies, you need to learn as well. And part of any learning department should be that you reflect on where things go wrong, and that's both educationally or any kind of error with a patient. Involve the trainees in those things. Review your practices. I'm interested, and it's a debate we could have about how much time you're all given to train. That's important. That's one to take up with your employer. You need to be given time, you need to be trained in the role, and you need to be aware of how you're doing. So that's about the appraisal of your role. And one thing I really recommend is if you have a role as an educational supervisor, talk about that at your appraisal. Share with your boss, go through those things. What other training do I need? How am I doing? This is what my trainees have been like through the year. Think about your role as a supervisor as much as you do your clinical role. It will really help. You also need good HR, and I would back up the HR departments time and time again. You need to know what human resources are like in your trust, in your deanery, in your training program. The advantage of a good HR department will never fail you. So engage with them, know their processes, know the policies, and how to get people in. And really, my last thing is just a screen. It's me wrapping up. I've I hope what I want people to take away is this, coming back to the first talk about that mindset. Uh, Training that's helped me most in my role as a supervisor has been a training I did a few years ago now for a coaching qualification. Coaching is a really nice model of supervision. And if there's a book you can read, have a look at a coaching book. That belief that the trainee in front of you can achieve, your belief in the trainee, and your belief that they have the power to solve things themselves. And some very helpful questions that you can learn, like we talked about earlier, getting to know your trainee, getting them through some problems, helping them become the independent workers. We talked about that earlier on. So much of what we need is for the trainee to take some responsibility here for any issues. You're there to support them. You're there to guide them. You're not there to be their doctor, and you're there to be friendly, but not their friend. So I'll wrap up and hope there's some questions later.